getting into the zone.
AutoZone.
The college football playoff is finally expanding to 12 teams next season. And this is something that is long overdue. It should have been done a long time ago. A long time ago. And we're here to just kind of discuss a few points of like how this is kind of changing everything that has to do with college football, basically. Maybe not a lot, but definitely every aspect of college football is being affected by this. And Zeki, I want
I'm
your
not
opinion
even.
on this first.
Okay. Refresh me just a little bit. Like trying to, we're doing uh, 12 man playoffs.
So what's happening is that in order to make this happen so quickly, they had to make deals with the current bowl stat or the current like New Year's Six bowls, because they had like contracts running through the 2026 season, I believe. So
Uh-huh.
otherwise, we would have had to have two more seasons of the four team brackets. So
Which everyone
2024 and
hates.
25.
I don't like. I get that the bowl games are important, but I don't know why it's such a stipulation with like why can't all the first round games be bowl games? That's my question. Or
There's a lot of speculation on if the bowls, like, I don't know. There's a lot of people who want the Rose Bowl to be the national championship game again, which I love the Rose Bowl, so I'd be okay with that. But at the same time, we've started this tradition of the national championship game being different every year. So
Yeah, which I
I don't
I'm
know.
actually more okay with that, but that's regardless and superfluous at the very least right now. That is where the location of the championship game is on such a low tier of
On
my
your
talking
importance
points
level,
that
okay.
I don't want to talk about it. Like, I mean, I'm okay that you brought it up, but like, it's like this
I
is
mean,
not an issue. When we're talking about college football issues that's going on in the country, talking about where the bowl games are played at or where the national championship game is a superfluous argument. It's like it is so
I understand that.
below all the importance of things that we got to talk about. We're talking
I
about
feel,
transitioning on
yeah,
I know I'm about to go on a quick little tangent here. We're talking about transitioning of players through portals. We're talking about transitioning of teams through conferences. We're talking about mega conferences. We're talking about a 12-man bracket that we seem to already have a convoluted, nonsensical way of handling it because I've just heard 2 minutes of Gerg going off of what's going on, and I have no idea how we're going to resolve this. This is already sounds like a nightmare. Like there's just 1,001 things that I think is a very big problem that we need to address. Don't worry, by the way, because I talked about in the last video, Florida State fan. Oh, I have a lot to talk about. We'll get there. I'm going to entertain the audience while you are looking for something, and probably talk about something a little mildly different than what we were talking about. I mean, we're talking about the
okay.
playoffs still, which still this has very much to do with the playoffs. Um, so I had a real com- confounding and very interesting thought process as we were looking at these like mega conferences. And like next year, we have so many teams joining the SEC. We have so many teams joining the Big Ten. Big 12 is going to be a mediocre Power Five conference simply because they're not. And I don't say mediocre because I believe that. I just think it's going to be mediocre because that's what the media is going to push it as to be. They're like, we got Cincinnati and we got you, UCF, and all those teams are, they're good. They've made their attempts, and it's just like, yeah, but they're good. Like, just acknowledge that they're good teams. Like, they joined the Big 12
Dudes.
conference. It's a very, very predominant conference. It's a Power Five conference. Like, appreciate that. Just appreciate it. You don't do it with the ACC. We'll get to that. Um, it's it's just one of these things that keeps like confounding. And the reason, and I was just puzzled by the idea that like we wanted such a massive amounts of teams joining one conference, and I was wondering what their logic was. And I was actually it was it was really confounding to me for the longest time until I finally realized what was happening, and I'm frustrated by this. We are going to see the SEC face up to like 20 to 22 teams next year. Okay, well let me fix myself. Let me fix
Let
Just
me
like
fix myself.
edit out the part where I'm wrong, or you could put it in, but just realize that I got corrected. That's fine.
I'll
I don't
just
care.
wrong,
Yeah,
and then that's it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're gonna have 16 teams. This doesn't take away from what I'm saying. So it's gonna have 16 teams. Most likely, you're gonna face 8 teams in your conference. So that are going to be in the SEC, the likelihood of more undefeated teams in the SEC is going to be higher because their argument is that they're going to have harder competition, but I don't buy it. The talking point that I have is that now there's going to be more, it's going to be more likely that there's going to be more tough teams, quote unquote, and they're going to have more opportunities for more higher ranked teams simply because now they're going to stack the competition in a certain way where you're going to have predominantly more teams that are going to be much higher in overall wins simply because you just have more teams. And there's no way that you're going to have all these teams compete with each other in the conference play because there's just not enough spaces for that. And so you're going to
Yeah,
find out that like all of a sudden before conference play may even start sometimes that you have like 12 teams that are undefeated before they all start facing each other. And it's going to really racketeer the point where SEC is going to just take over the top 25 because if you're an SEC team and you're undefeated, you're obviously just amazing. And that's just the numbers and the consistency of what we've seen in the college football playoff when it comes to ranking teams is that they're going to rank teams based upon who they think is the most advantageous, the most predominant teams in the nation, not necessarily what they've proven on the gridiron. And that's what's really frustrating about this whole situation because it's going to create not even a fair bias for the SEC and the Big Ten to have just the entire gauntlet of 25 teams just be those two conferences. And
yeah,
I hate it.
yeah. I'm
I
glad you
hate that so
expanded that to
much.
Big Ten because it's literally what's happening. They both absorb
Mm-hmm.
the big schools in the back Pac-12, and then the ones that are kind of developing still are going to the uh, Big 12. And sure, there could be powerhouses at some point soon, but I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC are both getting more powerhouses now. So it's going to be a question of whether or not these teams actually perform next year, and it might not even matter the way that the committee grades teams right now because there's this weird narrative for the SEC that was very evident this year for, you know, Georgia almost the best was almost the number one team for the entire season until the very last championship game where they lost.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. There's a lot of the weird grading systems that we don't agree with that we're gonna expand upon later on in
Mm-hmm.
our uh, our videos. Going off of what I was saying earlier about the 12 team, how it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to work is that so let's see. From what I can see, the top four teams get a bye. Yeah, the top four teams because it's the 12 team playoff, so they get the top four teams buys. And so there are four games that are played between 5 through 12. I can count. There we go. I see you're making a face.
They still can't get it right. When they get it right, they can't get it right. Like it's just annoying. 4 teams get a bye. Why?
I don't know. It's all I've heard is that it's to incentivize being like really good at the end of the season, winning your conference
How?
championship because there's so many
Okay,
teams that are just like, oh, we can just cruise into the playoffs and not try in our conference championship game.
no. Okay. So here's the thing that's so annoying about this too. What's annoying about that incentivizing argument is ridiculous. You want to incentivize teams, make them play. Make them play
But
for
that's
their
inherently the
positioning.
problem. Yeah,
Like you
because
make
they
them the reason why they're not incentivized is because if you're Alabama, you're going to make it into the Final Four. So that naturally you don't play well. That's why you can have a game like South Florida and just be like, I don't care. I'm going to make it anyways. We lose to Texas. I don't care. Oh no, we're going to make it anyways. Like that's the reason why you have like not people. like interested in trying to fight harder. That's the problem with the NFL. That's why the NFL was
Mm.
such a mediocre program for so long. We're actually seeing it be more vibrant than it ever has because there's more incentive to try harder. Like now there's been a lot of things in place that almost creates a sense of like, man, I really want to do this not for my team, not just for me, not just for my team, but for my community, for my thing. Like you're actually seeing a lot more to that. You're seeing a lot of NFL players coming out and being more aggressive in their games. Like that's matter again. Things about the sport are interesting again. It's not all the way around. You know, there's a lot of football programs in the NFL that's like really okay with being mediocre. I would say this the Steelers, for example, are a prime example of that. They are last few seasons they have been making it to the playoffs by the skin of their teeth because they just know they're going to be able to make it work. And that's not cool. But overall, if you want college football players to play, make them play. That's what you need to do. A lot of these players, especially these last few bowl games, opted out. They just decided I'm not going to play in my bowl game. I don't care about this team. I care about my success. And it's a lot of arguments I agree with it, and a lot of arguments I
Hmm.
don't agree with it because it's like then you don't have the team anymore. If you opt out, you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. There's no incentive for them to try harder when they know that it doesn't matter. When nothing matters, of course they're not going to try harder. So, like this idea that we're going to give teams buys, you're doing is you're keeping a team fresh. That's all you're doing. You're just keeping a team fresh for no reason.
Yeah, and I sure there. I mean, that is one thing potentially, but you, there's also a huge like. I mean, college football. We know this. It's all about having momentum. So I feel like that could possibly even harm teams if they have a bye the first week, which I don't know. It's
I don't
kind of a
agree.
more of a speculative thing, but I've seen it in the past. I saw it with Michigan 2 years in a row where they have a whole month of not doing anything, and then they go to a playoff game and get their asses beaten by
It's just a level
SEC
of
team and then a TCU team.
it's another level of unfairness because the reason why I'm saying this is because and this is why I'm all for a 16-man bracket because this is silly to me. Like in a 16-man bracket, we can fix a lot of these problems. Like um we everyone plays against everyone until they go to the final. You know, you get your quarters and your semis, then your no sorry, your yeah, your quarters, your semis, and then your
No, it's first round, quarters, semis, final.
thank you. First round, quarters,
Wait,
semis,
so
final.
what they should call it is just wild card. It's basically the same playoff as the NFL has now.
I don't like buys. That and this is just an opinion. I'm not telling you that this is the way I think it is. I don't like buys because it does create a bias. Ah, see what I did there? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
it does
yeah.
create a sense. It doesn't work to me. It because your exact argument's right. I'm right and you're right, Kirk. Like it creates a level of like, oh, they're sometimes too fresh. It also creates a level of like, oh, but the other team's exhausted. But what happens in a playoff game when people want it so badly and you end up going overtime game and then you go face the next team who just had a bye when you just had an overtime game. That's exhausting. That's not that's
Yeah, it definitely
it,
can be. Yeah.
it's exhausting. And that's not to say that overtime games don't happen in the playoffs. We just saw one. So it's not like it's unheard of. I
So,
don't like it. I don't like it. That's all I'm saying. I don't like it.
I mean, it doesn't matter what it is right now. That's just the format it's going to be in
It is
for
what it is.
however long it is.
Yeah,
I
it is what it is.
the first round of games, those four games are actually going to be played on campus and will be on the higher seeds campus. So they'll have, there's an advantage to being a higher seed there. And then in the quarterfinals, those are just neutral site games right now because of the bowl games. Which I'm not a fan of quarterfinals being bowl games, being neutral site. I would rather see more, you know, if you're going to give them a bye, then I guess you're also going to give them home field advantage at some point down the road, which is what I hear a lot of people talking about and going to that system instead of having bowl games be quarterfinals games. Now, the next round in semifinals, when there's 4 teams, I think that's a good opportunity to have neutral site games for those for the 4 teams that are going into it. I think that's a good opportunity. In the national championship, I always argue for that being neutral site.
I just don't know why we can't have a deal with bowl games. Just have the same bowl game because you have essentially bracket 1, bracket 2, bracket 3, bracket 4. We're talking about the major bowl games. Just have the bowl games host those brackets until they get down to the final 4. And then they can have their national championship contention games. You know what I mean?
See,
Like that makes a lot more sense to me than the silly arbitrary nonsense that we're trying to come up with. But again, that's very low on
but
my list of
what I'm
things of
saying is that
concerns.
your team worked hard all year round. They got a good spot in the playoffs. Would you want them to have home field advantage? Have like that? I feel like that's just another way of making it exciting at the end of the season. Is to have it like on
Home field
the
advantage
better
home
team
field
site,
well, home field advantage is great. So I mean then the first round be home field advantage. You know what I mean?
which it
Or
is. The wild
yeah,
card
the
round
first
is, yeah.
yeah, the wild card round just have home field advantage. And then the second round, which is you got 8 teams left, right? If I do the math right. Yeah, that's 8 teams. Because
Yeah.
4 teams get kicked out. So 8 teams now. So then those become the bowl games. Those become the 4 bowl games. Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and the Rose Bowl.
Quarterfinals, you have the Fiesta Bowl, Peach Bowl, Rose Bowl, All State Sugar Bowl. And then you have the semifinals being the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, well, that's great too. Yeah, that fixes the problem
Yeah.
too. Because then you go to
Yeah.
one bowl, then you go to the next bowl. Beautiful. That solves the problem. So the first round is just the wild card round, and then you get the bowl games, and then they go to the semifinals. And then, so if it is exactly that, then that's fine. That would
That's what
work.
it is right now. I
Yeah,
don't
I'm
know what
well
they're
with that.
going to
That's
do
fine.
after 2026. I don't know because there's nobody who's came up with a plan yet. They don't know what they want to do. Um, I think 2026 is a great opportunity to fix the playoff schedule for college football because these
I
games
agree.
don't start until December 20th, even though we added a round. It still takes a while to get to the freaking playoffs.
Yeah.
And the national championship game next year gets played on January 20th. So imagine that we still haven't played the national championship game. The semifinal games are played on Thursday and Friday, January 9th and 10th, because guess what? They don't want to compete with the NFL for time slots. These games are so late in the season that you are starting to fight the playoffs of the NFL, which they're a behemoth of a sport. And they're purposely scheduling these on really off days.
I get it. I actually do get it because like I don't think that the college level should compete with the NFL level in terms of ratings and viewership. But then your problem or your solution to that, Gerg, is just have the bowl games start sooner.
The reason people always are just like screaming that we can't have this at a certain time, it's like, oh, the kids have to have a break. They gotta have a break. They gotta have a holiday break. And you're like, you don't give a you don't give a shit about that with any other sport.
Yeah.
There's so many
What
holidays
about
that happen the rest of the year that they literally will. And there's exams in the springtime that sports have to play through because that's not because. But we can ignore that because there's just smaller sports. No. You can't have it both ways. That's not a
yeah,
valid argument when you don't give the other 23 sports the same.
there's no such thing as a break for basketball. Like, I like
No,
you don't see
basketball doesn't
that.
get a break.
Yeah, you don't get breaks for basketball. You don't get breaks for baseball. Like you don't get breaks for
Oh,
even
definitely
college
not. Yeah.
baseball. So there's no breaks. And NHL's the same exact way too. You don't ever stop playing those sports. You're constantly on them.
Until your season's done. That's what I was
Yeah,
saying. Yeah.
yeah, you just don't stop playing those sports. So the fact that college football needs to take a breather is ridiculous. That's a silly argument. if you compare that to every other sport in the nation, that's a silly stance to stand on once you look at the facts.
That's what.
Think of the kids. It's like, come on, they're adults.
Think
Like
of
they,
think of the exams. Why
well,
you don't think of the exams in springtime?
like that doesn't work. Like, and I'm not trying to belittle sports players. I'm not belittling the athletes for that. I'm saying your argument is stupid. Like that's where I'm coming from.
I can guarantee you that if you ask the actual athletes to, they would want to keep playing. Like even if they like maybe they want to have a week between the regular season and the first round of the playoffs or bowl games or whatever you want to call it. Because you mentioned earlier about like the opt outs and everything now, so I don't know what to do about the other bowl games at the moment.
We'll talk. That's
It's
another
a
topic
big
for another
problem.
time. And then we have tons of rants to
But
go through. I still gotta talk about how they did my team wrong. I gotta talk about it. I gotta talk about it. It's gonna take
yeah,
a whole 3
it's coming.
hours. No,
It's
no.
coming.
It's coming,
I'm
guys. Don't
waiting for
worry,
it.
it's coming.